Hi, my name is Davin Michelson, and I'm one of the instructors at Intertech Training here in Eagan, Minnesota. And what I'm going to show you here is the first chapter of an SSIS course that I've delivered as an MCT, a Microsoft Certified Trainer. I am an MCITP in BI for both SQL 2005 and 2008, and my email address there, davin@intertech.com. You can always shoot me an email if you have any questions about any of the courses or anything else, and I can redirect your question if I don't have the answer, or I can go ahead and send you a response right away. Now what we're showing here is the first chapter from the Microsoft official course for SSIS 2008. Know that these topics also apply for the most part to SQL 2005 as well as the 2008 R2 edition as well. When you come take the training at Intertech, I will actually be using a little bit different courseware that has more details and more exercises and more labs. But anyways, what I thought I'd do is go ahead and cover here within the next half hour or so about what makes up SSIS, which of course is the replacement for the old DTS environment that we had back in SQL 2000. So we'll take a look at an overview of SQL Server Integration Services, SSIS as I call it, as Microsoft's primary ETL utility, extract, transform, and load, and about using some of the integration services tools. This is a screenshot that actually shows a lot of different parts of SSIS and what's actually involved when we create this thing called an SSIS package. The whole purpose of SSIS, of course, is to take data from one or more data sources, possibly cleansing it, modifying it, or taking it just as is, and putting it into a data destination. Now it could be putting it into multiple destinations as well, and even taking in data that we just don't find acceptable and putting that off into maybe an error log of some sort. Note that we can have any type of source and any type of database or destination to do this, if you will. We do this by creating an SSIS package, which is really a file that ends with the .dtsx extension, as you can see in the upper right corner of the screen here. A DTSX file is really just an XML document, but thankfully with Business Intelligence Development Studio, which is BIDS, which is actually just Visual Studio, it allows us to it gives us a great designer to go ahead and create these DTSX packages. Some other things that you're seeing here, of course, are the tasks shown up in the yellow area there. That's what a package contains. A package actually contains one control flow, which acts as the actual backbone of the package, with any number of tasks. And one of the most important tasks that we have that exists in the toolbox is that data flow task. And you can see that the data flow task actually contains any number of transformation shapes, working with one or more sources and one or more destinations. I'll show you this within BIDS just so you have a good idea of what we're actually looking at. Know that BIDS is Visual Studio 2008. Keep in mind that the version of BIDS that you have will it'll actually align with whatever version of SQL Server you have. So if you have SQL 2005, you're going to get BIDS 2005, which is actually Visual Studio 2005. Whereas with SQL 2008, even the R2 edition, you're going to get Visual Studio 2008. So what is SSIS, of course? It is Microsoft's primary ETL utility. And the best part about SSIS is it comes bundled freely with SQL Server 2008. You actually get SSIS, which is an ETL utility, included with it, as well as you get a couple of other BI tools, right? For example, we get SSAS, SQL Server Analysis Services, and that allows you to go ahead and work with cubes, maybe pulling data from a data warehouse. And we also get SSRS, SQL Server Reporting Services, is also included with SQL Server. That allows us to go ahead and create awesome reports, perhaps maybe pulling data from a cube. Or we could go ahead and pull it from any other type of data source. And of course SSRS allows us to create reports that can be viewed in a browser and even exported into multiple formats such as Word, Excel, and even PDFs. SSIS is the platform for ETL operations. It is not the next version of DTS like we had in SQL 2000. They actually started from scratch and recreated the entire SSIS engine when it came out. Although you may see some references to DTS, for example, if you do some custom programming with SSIS, maybe creating custom components, tasks, or transformations, know that those are still also brand new when it came out with SQL 2005. In other words, when they started creating the new SSIS engine, they wanted to continue with the DTS, which is Data Transformation Services. They wanted to use that same acronym that it had in the earlier days, and then someone, perhaps in marketing, who knows where at Microsoft, decided to change its name to SSIS. SSIS is the platform for ETL operations, though, and people oftentimes purchase a license of SQL Server just to get SSIS capability, this ETL utility or capability, for their other types of databases out there. For example, some other ETL operations that might be example for Oracle or some of the other databases out there are much more expensive, and so they'll just actually buy SQL Server just for its SSIS capabilities. SSIS does consist of one control flow engine in a package and any number of data flows that might be included within that control flow. I always like to tell people the control flow is the backbone of the entire SSIS package. And remember, an SSIS package is nothing more than a text file that is in XML format saved with the .dtsx extension. X, of course, standing for XML. So some common uses for integration services. As we can see, we can import and export data, maybe move it from one database to another. Maybe you have a data warehouse because you want to get more into the BI world with your company. Maybe the company needs to start analyzing the widgets that they're selling and who's buying the widgets and some other things like that. Some of the questions are coming up, and those questions can only be answered through business intelligence, where we can go ahead and maybe use some data mining structures, for example, or things of that nature. Well, we can go ahead and just move it from perhaps an OLTP database, an online transaction processing database, over to an OLAP style database where we could go ahead and create one or more cubes. And of course this gets into the whole world of SSIS and the way you want to model those cubes with a star schema, or maybe do a little bit of snowflaking off of the stars. And that's a whole different gamut altogether, depending on the model you want to go with and things of that. Anyways, continuing on here with the slide, we can also use this to integrate heterogeneous data. For example, maybe you need to pull data from two completely different types of databases and then put them together into a single destination. Like you might have to pull your customers from a Microsoft CRM database, but you also got to pull your order processing out of a great Oracle app you've been using and put that into maybe a sales report, or I should say a sales destination database, and maybe that could be used and harvested and put into reports. Maybe you need to clean up the data. This is something I've done in the past as a consultant as well. I've gone ahead and worked on some projects where we had to move data from a mainframe and bring it into SQL Server. And the mainframe was able to go ahead and export the stuff as text files, and then what we did was we actually wrote custom SSIS packages to pull that data out and populate it into a database. Unfortunately, some of that data wasn't perfect. Some of the fields were often left blank, or some of them had the wrong type of data inside of there. And so within our SSIS packages, we could actually go ahead and clean and standardize that data so that the applications that would read that data wouldn't crash because of null values, for example, or wrong types of data. As well, even during the clean and standardization process, it was never a single sweep process. But instead, it was constant modifications to the SSIS package. And for the rows that were just absolutely garbage, maybe we just made a decision about those and not move those into the destination. And of course, as it suggests at the bottom there, supporting BI solutions might mean that you're using SSIS to populate a data warehouse. You could have it run on a schedule so that it takes all of the daily orders, populates it into that data warehouse. Data warehouses are not typically the same as OLTP style databases. They are normally denormalized. They're not normalized like an OLTP database, but instead they might have longer tables, wider tables, many more columns, making them perform quicker to retrieve some sorts of data. So it can also go ahead and support SSIS, for example, or other BI solutions that might not be Microsoft SQL Server related even. As well as, of course, don't forget reports is sitting on top of all of that, giving us some awesome information maybe for the Vice President of Sales, displaying information about his team and what sales has been working, what hasn't, what products tend to sell at certain times of the year. These are all questions or business intelligence questions that can be answered by this entire suite. So fundamental integration, we know that we have to create a package. That's ultimately the output whenever we're working with SSIS, is to create that DTSX package. And we do that right from Visual Studio. Remember, Visual Studio actually comes with SQL Server 2005 or 2008. And in 2008, when you install SQL Server, one of the options is to install BIDS, Business Intelligence Development Studio. And so what you do is you actually create a project that is an SSIS project, and you'll notice that you can add any number of packages to it. While you're editing that one package, the designer will show you the control flow. You only have one control flow per package, and as I said, that's our backbone. But in the control flow, we can have any number of data flows, because one of the tasks that can be dragged and dropped onto the control flow is that data flow. Our packages can work with any number of variables, whether the variable is defined within the package, maybe even within a container or at the task level, or we can even inherit packages, or I should say package variables, from parent packages. When we have several packages that need to run together, you may want to define one Uber parent package whose sole job is to call a bunch of other packages in a synchronous fashion. There's a lot of really cool things we could do with SSIS. And again, this is just about running a huge, any number of tasks. There are many tasks available. As well, making sure that everything runs smoothly, or monitoring it and knowing when something doesn't run so smoothly. We do have different ways of handling events as well. So the inputs are any number of tasks in the toolbox, including custom-built tasks. Now most of the time, you're going to find that all the tasks included in the toolbox are going to give you all the capabilities you need. And if you really do need some custom capability from a particular task in the toolbox, you can by all means go ahead and write a custom script task. We actually have a script task where it allows you to write some C# or VB code to go ahead and do some unique functionality. Creating your own custom-built tasks is obviously an advanced programming functionality, and it is supported, by the way. Microsoft wants you to do this. They've published the APIs out there, but it's not going to be extremely easy, especially if you don't have a lot of programming experience. So that's why they gave us a script task that we can use for that. As well, keep in mind the inputs are going to be those data sources. Continuing on here, working with those tasks, we drag them onto the control flow, which is really the package itself. Even where it says the word package there, that really means you're dragging and dropping those tasks into that control flow. And of course, then one of the control flows that we have, notice the other brown box there, one of our other tasks that we have is the data flow. That data flow can have any number of transformations inside of it. And then ultimately, we can take that package and go ahead and publish it off either to the file system or to the SQL Server database. They can actually hold packages as well. Working with connection managers. The connection managers, of course, are just the connections to our sources and our destinations. And of course, we can work with any number of log providers as well. We cover that in this course as well. All of the stuff that you're looking at, we actually cover directly in the class. Now, before I continue on, I've talked about this package, control flow, data flow. How does this all mend up in BIDS? Let's take a look at that. So I'm going to switch over to Visual Studio 2008, or if I'm a BI developer, this is called BIDS. As I said before, BIDS is really just Visual Studio. The key is when I choose to create a brand new project, notice I'm looking at business intelligence projects. This is BIDS, and notice the different types of projects that I have as well. Those are the three different types of projects which of course align with the three different forms of BI that SQL Server includes: SSIS, IS, and RS. For example, these first two are AS, these here are IS, and of course these three down here for RS. That's what we get right out of the box with SQL Server. Now typically you're installing SQL Server Standard Edition, Enterprise Edition. If you're a developer, by all means you probably want to be working with Developer Edition because that has all the same functionality as the full Enterprise Edition. There are a few tasks, for example, or transformations I believe, that are missing from the Standard Edition of SQL Server that you don't get with Standard that you would normally get with Enterprise. So I always recommend that developers, your BI developers, you always work with Developer Edition. You can buy Developer Edition of SQL 2008 for $50 on newegg.com. Not an advertisement, but just letting you know there's ways of getting the Developer Edition quite cheaply. So what I might want to do is actually choose the Integrated Services project. Notice the other choice that I have here is connections. That's a really poor name for it, guys. This really means you just want to pop open a wizard and have it hold your hand a little bit as you create your first package if you're not used to that. It helps you pick out your source and your destination. That's what they mean by connections. And it should have called it a wizard, really. I mean, that's what they called this other one right here. Notice the description here. It just tells you, yeah, you're going to create the project using a wizard. So anyways, I'm going to just go ahead and create one from scratch here with Integration Services Project. Notice it's going to be called Integration Services Project 7. That's because I got 6 other garbage ones I've been working on. Now when I create this project, if you haven't worked with Visual Studio before, it's going to be a little bit daunting to see this entire UI. There is a lot here, I understand that. But that's because Visual Studio has to support so many different types of projects. Not only is it supporting the 3 different types of BI projects, but this is a primary development environment for all .NET developers. Whether they're creating WPF applications, web applications, Silverlight applications, this one UI has a lot to it. So that's why there's a lot of different drop-down menus, but oftentimes, to be honest, that's just more than one way to do the exact same thing. We have one project showing up here, and it's contained within a solution. Solutions act as containers for projects, and you can have any number of projects within the one solution, but you can only have one solution open at a time. If you need to have 2 solutions open, open up 2 Visual Studios. There's nothing wrong with that. Visual Studio runs side by side quite nicely. Now within this solution I've got this one project, and it happens to contain one package. Unfortunately, this package name is pretty weak, so oftentimes the first thing I do is rename the package. Right? I'll come in here and I'll right click and choose rename, and I'll give it a good name. Oh, I don't know. Let's see, I'll call mine Tuesday because it happens to be Tuesday today. Hit enter, and then it's asking me if I want to rename the internal package object as well. Here's my recommendation, folks. Always say yes, especially if you ever have to manipulate this package later on. It's just always the best practice to say yes when it asks you this. It's very tough to change that later on. Now, as I said, all this package is really just an XML file. If I actually wanted to see it, I can just right click and view code. And here it is. There's my machine name, that's me, and there's a bunch of other settings in here. Now, if I want to be a hardcore package programmer, I'm just going to live in this world. That's a fantasy world. This is ridiculous. Nobody's going to write packages in here. You may want to go in here and tweak something. I understand that. That makes a lot of sense. Or understand how something's working. But for the most part, I don't want to edit my package this way. So I'm going to go ahead and close that view. Instead, what I want to use is this fantastic designer they've given us here. Now notice right away we do have the one tab for control flow. This is the only control flow we have in this one package. I can certainly go ahead and add new packages if I want, right? Or migrate even DTS 2000 packages. That's cool. You know, you don't always want to migrate them. Sometimes you want to leave them just the way they are because they're rock solid. Well, don't worry. We actually have a task to go ahead and call those. This is that huge list of tasks I was talking about. There's a lot of different tasks here that, of course, can help us with moving data from one or more sources to one or more destinations, helping us along the way. But there's one task here that's just sitting amongst all the others like, you know, he's just like, oh no, I'm no big deal, I'm just another task. Not really. This guy right here, the data flow task, actually is a very important task because that's what brings us to the data flow tab. The data flow task is actually the one that's going to be in charge of actually doing ETL transformations. And what we do is we drag and drop this guy onto your form, and then what we can do is edit him. Now inside of him is where we actually choose our sources, our transformations, and our destinations, and you will see that we can have many transformations added to it. Now when I open these guys up, try not to double click the words because it tries to rename it for you. Instead, always double click the icons themselves. It just makes a lot more sense and it's a lot easier. That's your target there for your mouse cursor, if you will. Also, make sure you name these things. What's this thing supposed to be doing? Give this thing a good name. It's very important to name your task because you'll come back to this 6 months from now and you'll wonder, what the heck does that task do? Or if you get over 40 like me, you'll wonder next week, what the heck was that supposed to do again? Anyways, when you double click it, you'll notice right away at the top, we changed over to the data flow tab. And the toolbox woke up and said, oh, we're in the data flow. Okay, well, here we go. We've got sources up here. We got destinations down here. And we got transformation shapes. Notice these fuzzy ones? Those are enterprise only, by the way, or developer edition like I'm running. These are the ones that you can use for actually doing your transformations, moving data from one source to another. Note that you can even change to other data sources that might be on your control flow, but just by changing them here in the drop-down menu. Like for example, back over here in the control flow, I could go ahead and add some more data flows. There's no reason I can't do this, right? And they don't have to connect to each other. Mind you, it's not going to run in a synchronous fashion based on the position of these controls. Not unless I put them into a specific container, like a sequence container. Only then would they run first this task, then this task. And as well, I got to point out, see, I can put these guys inside of here. It's pretty cool. And then notice how I can connect them. Only now will this one run first, and then this one will run because they happen to be in this container. So right now, if I wanted to go execute my package, what's going to start up? Well, this one's going to start up, and simultaneously, this one's going to start up as well. Keep that in mind. All your different tasks are going to run simultaneously unless they're in a specific sequence container. Only when this one was completed will it start this one down here. And again, just double-click any of them, and you can go ahead and work with that data flow task, working with these different transformations. I can drag any number of shapes on here, like an OLADB data source. And you'll notice how, once I get this guy configured, he'll show up down here in the connection manager. So I can go ahead, and you see this red X, he's telling me, hey, this thing isn't set up yet. You got to set this guy up. And you can actually double-click the red arrow, or the red X, if you will, to help you configure this guy. So here I can go ahead and choose to create my connection manager. And it says, hey, you don't have any down here yet. It's like, oh yeah, okay. So I'll go ahead and choose one here, maybe AdventureWorks. Click OK. And then I could choose perhaps a name of a table or put in a SQL command, if you will. And then choose that actual object. Right? And there's a ridiculous amount of objects in here. And now notice the red X went away and it's good to go. As well, down here in my connection manager screen, you can see I've got AdventureWorks all ready to go. Now I might just go ahead and say, yep, there's my source. And I need a flat file destination, right? And the happy path is green. I'll just have that connect to my flat file destination. Again, setting up where this is actually going to go, and I don't have a connection manager here either. So I could go ahead with delimited, fixed width, ragged right, or fixed width, road, whatever I want to actually have it set up to. And then I can choose a file name. Showing me the actual columns there, and I can go to the mappings, and I can see that the columns from the available input columns are going to be copied over to the file. I click OK, and look at that, the red X is away. Some of these things are like, ooh, I got to line this up, right? I got to move this 0.5 millimeter over to the right. This is ridiculous. Don't do that. You can just right or select a group of the items here and go to your Format drop-down menu. Here you can go ahead and align like maybe on centers. Look at that, isn't that slick? There's all kinds of other cool things you can do. For example, you can choose to auto size these things. Oh, nice, it took off my alignment. Take a look at some of the other things you can do off your Format menu as well. Make same size, horizontal spacing, vertical spacing. That's going to mean more to you when you have more shapes on here. Okay. So this is my data flow task, and this one happens to be data flow task 1. I go back to my control flow. Keep in mind it's this guy right here. I got to remove the connection before I can move that guy. That's fine. It does not like that at all. I can go ahead and blow away some of these other ones here. And get rid of that sequence container. It's giving me all kinds of warnings here about deleting that. Are you sure? Because it's a big deal when you're blowing those away. Remember, every object within the control flow or the data flow has its own set of properties. Like here, for example, I'm looking at data flow 1. These are the properties for it. Now, if you've done any development in .NET, or if you've taken like a C# or VB class with me or an ASP.NET class, oftentimes I recommend my students sort them alphabetically. However, When I'm doing BI work with SSIS, IS, or RS, I like to sort them by category because there's usually not that many properties, and it does help me find the properties because of their types. They've got some really good categories in the properties window when you're actually running these. See the asterisk at the top? It means it hasn't been saved yet. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the Save All. And that's saving those changes off to that data flow. Now you might actually have multiple tasks on this control flow. As we saw, we had multiple data flow tasks, or you might just have one, and that's it. I can set up event handlers to go ahead and subscribe to certain events here, like for example handling the on error, on information, or what have you, and even explore the package, taking a look at the variables that are contained within it. These are some of the system variables. You can tell by the color of them, and they start, of course, with that namespace system, and even my event handlers. So now I can go ahead and execute this thing, and it turned green. Yay! We love green. Green means it is successful. And it says down here at the output window, finish, success. And then of course I can stop debugging. If it failed, I would see red, right? If it was some reason it couldn't connect to the file, it couldn't write, or could be even worse than that. So that should have created a little text file in the root of my C drive. If it did not, that's okay, I'll go on like nothing happened. Okay, so here we got, let's see, today is the 405 test.txt, and here's where it moved all that information over to this txt file directly from the AdventureWorks database. So that's pretty cool. That's just a little taste of what you can do with SSIS. Know that back over here in the data floor I can obviously choose many more destinations, and yes, I may want to set up a SAD path as well, maybe have a flat file destination, especially if I am actually doing some transformations. This is something we can go into class though. We can see how we can actually do like data conversions, copy a column, maybe create a derived column from 2 or 3 other columns. There's a lot of really cool things we can do in the transformation section. As well, remember, we are also going to cover many best practices. One of the last chapters we cover is just a huge number of best practices. Like for example, some of these transformations are blocking. They will literally wait until it's done. They'll wait until the transformation's done before, or they've gotten all the data from the source before they perform the transformation. Like for example, this sort one can't actually sort all your records until it's gathered them all up from your source. Can you imagine what it's doing in the memory buffers? It's getting absolutely mammoth in memory, then it performs a sort, and then it pushes it off to your destination. You know, as a general rule, when we're doing our transformations, we want to do that work as close to the actual data sources as possible before we actually get it into SSIS. Even though it's intended and it was designed to handle large amounts of memory, still, there's a lot of best practices you need to follow within SSIS. And when you take the training with us at Intertech, I'll hook you up with those best practices. As well, I always tell people this, when you come take a class, by all means, you also want to talk to the other students who are doing the exact same stuff you're doing. That's one of the advantages of taking classroom training, is just to talk to other people who are doing the same thing, right? How many people do you know on your block that are doing SSIS packages, right? Exactly. Maybe not too many of your neighbors, but you come together in a community like a classroom environment, you can all discuss these features. Now this is done. All I'd have to do is deploy this package, and there's actually 3 different destinations I can choose. They always talk about 2 of them, like with SQL Server 2008, like you can either go to the file system or you can go to the database. There is actually the old one, which is the package store, and that's just a specific file location. And of course, once it's deployed, it can be executed. And of course, there's a few different ways that we can go ahead and execute our packages. Like from the command line, we can run dtexec. He'll go ahead and run our packages, right? Or if you need help setting up all the different options, open up dtexec UI, which is another command line utility. And this guy will actually set up all the different files, or I should say properties. Maybe you're going to have a separate configuration file. You can use that as well. Or different options. There's many different options you can set when you execute your package, and this guy will actually help you build it all up and ultimately choose the command line. It's, by the way, that dtexec UI, he's just calling this guy in the background when you're done. dtexec, that's actually what executes your package. So this is just a little taste of doing SSIS development. I could certainly go ahead and add additional packages, or I could work with additional projects as well. One thing I always see with students is sometimes this Solution Explorer doesn't show up for them in bids. And a little tip that I like to tell everybody is if you just go into Tools and Options within BIDS, and you go down to Projects and Solutions under General, there is a little checkbox here to always show solution. I always have that guy checked because I always want to see that container for my project. It drives me nuts not to see that. So if you open up BIDS, let me uncheck that for you, and you see this and you're like, where's my solution? Well, you got to turn that on in BIDS. Just go to Tools and Options and check that box for always showing solution. That's under your Projects and Solutions area under Tools Objects. Cool. So now, I showed you a little bit about BIDS, and of course how we can work with AS, RS, and IS. Those are the 3 separate classes that I deliver at Intertech, besides the .NET classes and the TFS classes that I teach. And we do have the 5 different tabs. Remember, how many control flows can we have in a package? 1. How many data flows? Well, that depends on how many data flow tasks you dragged and dropped right onto your control flow. We've got event handlers that we can create to subscribe to certain events within our packages, as well as the Package Explorer, which allows us to actually look in there and find out more information about it, such as maybe custom variables. Progress and execution. You know, I showed you when my package ran, it ran instantaneously. That was ridiculously fast, and that's not real world, guys. Real world, you're going to be moving maybe several 100,000 records, who knows, even more than that. And while that's running, it's nice to see what's going on. See, when you develop your package, you're not just going to write it once and you're done. You're going to be making all kinds of tweaks, try again, try again, try again, and then when you feel it's rock solid, then you'll run it, you'll schedule it as a production package, and then the next day when it comes back because you forgot something, then you'll make some more modifications to it again, because this is real world, right? Forgot that one little thing, and then you'll fix that, and you'll test it within BIDS, and then it'll officially become a rock solid package. Of course, we can go ahead and monitor the progress while we test it within BIDS and make sure that it's working properly. So using our packages, we can import and export our packages as well. We have an import and export tool for moving it either to a certain file location or to the database itself. We can manage them and run them right within BIDS, and of course monitor them as they're executing. There is an import and export wizard that can help you create a package. If you don't want to open up BIDS, if you just need to get some data moved quick and fast, you don't have to use BIDS. There's a SQL Server import and export wizard, and this will actually create a package on the fly in memory, and there'll be a little checkbox at the end that says, hey, you want to save this guy off as a package? And it'll go ahead and save it as a file for you, as a DTSX. Otherwise, it just throws it away. We do have a configuration wizard and package installation wizard. These are all available right within BIDS. And of course, these are some of those command line utilities. Notice the DTExec and the DTExec UI. DTUtil is a nice way of moving packages as well, not executing them, but to actually make changes to them or move them. A lot of functionality built into DTUtil. You know what? Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I hope this has been an informational video for you. If you'd like to come to Minnesota, take some training, or if your group is large enough, I can come out there as well as part of Intertech. Go ahead and just go to intertech.com. That's our website, and I'd be honored to have you in my class, learning about SSIS or any of the other BI classes or whatever you might be needing. I do love teaching. I'm a teacher first, and then a lover of the technology second. That's very important. So keep in mind, I want to remind you, the class will use slightly different courseware than the mock that you're looking at, because the mock class has some nice graphics, but I like to have a little more hands-on practice with labs and exercises. So happy ETLing, folks, and have a great day.